Hey, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the On the Roof with Jess podcast. I am excited to be here with you. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Starting out doing video, I'm not the most comfortable. I have done this a few times, and talking to my own self on a video is very different than my other formats of podcast, where typically I've had the camera off and I can kind of close my eyes and get in the zone. And this is very different. So, thank you for being here. Thanks for being patient with me. Let's see how this first episode goes on camera in a new way. So, I just want to say first and foremost that I'm going to be talking a little bit about White Lotus. If you don't watch White Lotus, don't worry about it. I'm talking more so about the high level of what it is that White Lotus sort of brought through for me. And as always, everything I share here, something I've learned over the years is the more that I think I know something, the less I often know. And so my intention is to share perspectives and to invite you to just think for yourself. I hope that today's episode can spark some new thoughts for you, some new perspective, and invite you to ask yourself new questions. So, with that being said, the topic I want to talk about today is this idea that's from the last episode of White Lotus, which is Amor Fati. It's this idea of embracing your fate. And the question that I'm asking and I'm posing is, what does it mean to embrace your own fate? And is fate fixed? Is fate something that is predestined and pre-planned? I don't know. We'll find out. Or we won't, and that'll be okay too. So, spoiler alert, if you have not watched the last episode of White Lotus, I would watch it first before you listen to this. Because I'm going to talk about who died. Sorry. So, in the show, what we saw during White Lotus, this last season of White Lotus, is I would say the last episode of White Lotus was perfectly planned with the alignment of the planets because we have been underneath the gene key 51. The sun has been under the gene key 51 for the last 4 or 5 days. And the gene key 51 is an energy that is about awakening. And it is about shock that wakes us up, shock that awakens us out of our sleep. And then we can no longer see life in the same way as a result. And so the last episode of White Lotus really stood out to me because in this episode, there's these three siblings. They're called the Ratliff siblings. And all three of them come with a very specific intention in mind. I would say all of the characters come with an intention in mind, but these three sort of stuck out to me in a different way because they all had very shocking awakening experiences. And maybe I won't spoil who died in White Lotus. We'll see if it comes out, but I'm just putting the spoiler alert out there in the event I say it. So we see the oldest brother, Saxon, comes in and he is kind of on a mission. He's like, I want to take over my dad's company or at least be next to my dad in the company. And he's very much about material needs. He's about ladies, getting with the ladies and money and working out. We see the middle sibling who is Piper, and Piper is very much about actually trying to reject her material needs. Like her family is very well off, and she's like, I'm going to go live in a monastery next year. That's why I brought everybody here to the White Lotus. I'm going to go live in a monastery. I'm going to reject my material needs, and I'm going to, be one with spirituality. Then we see the youngest brother, Lachlan, and Lachlan is basically like, who am I? I'm a people pleaser. I'm stuck between going to school where my mom went and going to school where my dad went. And I just want everybody to like me and I want to please my brother and sister, which ends up happening in a strange way. Anyways, but I think we can all relate to this idea, at least I think we can, of having these intentions for our lives where we're like, my life is going to look like this. I'm going to take this path. This is the thing I want for myself. And, for me personally, there were more extreme versions of this where, maybe in my younger years, I was like, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to be married. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to have a house. I'm going to have all these things. But I would also say for myself personally, I've many times had micro, like that would be like the macro, but I've also had a lot of micro moments of expectation, even in the dating world of like, it's going to look like this, and I'm going to find a partner like this. And, on the micro level, like, I'm going to go work in this area and it's going to be easy and I'm going to get along with everyone. And it just hasn't always turned out the way that my mind expected it to. And what we see happen with the Ratliff kids is number one, we look at Saxon, who's like very much based in material needs. And he has this shocking experience, like this Gene Key 51 experience of waking up where he's like, oh my God, he has a strange experience with his brother. And it just shakes him and rattles him to his core that that could happen. And it sort of sets him in this trajectory of um, being open because he's this persona that he had created for himself was so broken down in that moment and who he thought he was that he ended up kind of having an awakening. And this character, Chelsea, gives him these spiritual books and he starts looking at Chelsea and her partner and sees how they reunite with each other once they're apart. And he has this moment of like, oh my gosh, maybe I want that for myself. Maybe it's not just about getting laid. Maybe it is actually about connection. Maybe that's something that's possible for me. And you see him leave this White Lotus in that last scene. The first episode, he's very like, here I am, and I'm going to take care of things. And he gets in this like confrontation with this guy, Rick, on this boat because he's smoking. And he's like, I got this. It's like this cocky energy. And by the end, you see him, he's kind of sitting back and he's reading this book. And this whole persona of who he thought he was starts to shift, right? Through shocking experiences. We see Piper, the middle daughter, come in and she's like in this like white outfit and she's going to go to the monastery and she's going to reject all of her material needs because her family's so material based. And she goes to the monastery and she's like, I don't think I can live like this. And maybe this way we live isn't so bad. And maybe the rejection of my family has really just been a cry out for wanting to be connected. I'm putting in my own interpretation here, right? But we see that energy of, I thought this was going to be one way. I thought I was going to come live in Thailand. I thought my life was going to look like this. That then ends up actually shifting into maybe things aren't so bad where I am. And then we see the final brother, who's Saxton, and he is kind of stuck just trying to make everybody like him and figure out who he is in the grand scheme of things. I don't even think he was really trying to figure out who he was. I think he was just trying to get love and approval from everyone. And he has these experiences. I would say, honestly, Lachlan ends up probably having the most experiences of traumatic things, ending in him having a near-death experience at the end. And what I think he kind of gets from that is like he disappoints his brother. He disappoints his sister. He gets rejected by his sister. His dad accidentally, I don't know if we can call it accidentally. Let's be honest. Like near-death experiences him, right? And he comes back to life. And he has this experience of like, he's like, I think I saw God. And I think with that, he kind of has this awakening, right? He has these micro little awakenings, but then he has this massive awakening that's probably going to shape the trajectory of his life moving forward. I'm not quite sure how as of yet, but he'll figure it out. So the whole idea here is that this question of how often do we think that we're moving in a specific direction and life is going to look a certain way, and these things happen that rattle us to ultimately come home to ourselves. And I think when I think about this question of like, what does it mean to embrace your own fate? And is fate something that's external of ourselves? For me personally, the way that I see it is, you know, we have these things that we're like, oh, this experience is showing up for me. I don't know why, but this thing isn't working out. And it's forcing me to move in a new direction. I could say for myself in many ways, there were aspects of my business before that were not working, like just not working. And what it did was it actually forced me to look inward and be like, well, what do I want? I could say, oh, I'm watching so and so do this, and I see myself in this person, or I see this person in myself. And it feels like fate. I met this person and now I'm going to move in that same direction. But then all of a sudden this experience happens. It's like, well, that doesn't work. Or, this happened and it set me in a different direction on my track. And now I'm having to go back in this direction. And maybe I'm not even happy about having to go back in this direction. Or maybe I am happy about going in this direction. And then I start moving in this direction and I'm like, wow, I love this. Or I really don't like this. And now it's forcing me to go that way, right? Fate to me, oftentimes, I think it has an external and an internal component because the external fate is, wow, was this situation fated? Was it fated for me to meet this person or to have this experience, right? If I kind of put it to the idea of the White Lotus, I look at Piper and she was like, oh my gosh, there's a monastery in Thailand and I happen to be on spring break this week or whatever it was. I'm going to get my family to go, right? And then maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the other people on the trip were like, oh, wow, right? Like, this is so perfect. The timing of this is so kismet. I, you know, I can take time to figure out if I want to go to Duke or I want to go to the other school, right? So we have these external experiences, in my opinion. It's like these external experiences that seem fated. It seems like the stars aligned and things clicked into place. And there seems to be this internal fate of coming into connection with and resonance with our soul and our spirit at the same time. So, this thing outside of myself that came into my life sparked an internal revolution, right? They all probably were jazzed to go to Thailand and have all of the things line up so they could get there. But then when they got there, there were a lot of mishaps that ultimately, I think, rearranged their internal fate and their internal alignment and who they are. I used to struggle personally because I was very big into manifestation. And I couldn't understand why it was that I could kind of put into the world, like, this is what I want. I want this. And it would happen. But then it wouldn't go as I wanted it to go. And oftentimes it would come with like a tower moment or like a Gene Key 51 shocking experience that woke me up that then rearranged my internal life, right? So it was almost like these faded experiences where I'd be like, well, this is what I want. And I'm putting it out to the universe. And it would immediately show up like that. But the lessons that came with it were so rich and deep. I often couldn't see them in the moment. But it made me start to have this question of why is it that I can manifest something that I want on the external, but then on the internal, it feels hard or it doesn't go the way that I wanted it to. And so, from the perspective of this idea of like fate, it's really even just this season of White Lotus, which is like a funny, it's like a funny and dark, and like there's lots of different perspectives and ways to look at at this show because it's very loaded. Um, but it allowed me personally to reflect on this idea of like you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need, or you do always get what you want on the you can always get what you want on the external, but you don't always get what you want on the internal. And so this idea, I think, of embracing my own fate is understanding that everything in life is here to grow me. And that the more that I personally hold on to expectations of, well, this is happening, so my life's going to be perfect now, or this is happening, so I'm going to end up, I don't know, having the result that I want to have. The more that I've kind of come to this, my own personal, like, Amor Fati, like this personal external things are going to happen that are going to shape my internal world. Sometimes negative things are going to happen on the external that actually positively feel positive on the internal. And sometimes positive things are going to happen on the external that are going to feel negative on the internal. And I think the more that I continue to let go of expectations and come home to my true nature and my ability to listen on the internal plane, the more it feels, in fact, like I am embracing my own fate. Because when I'm so in expectation of what I think things need to be and I'm in that grasping, I feel suffering, right? Like, which I guess is probably, I don't know much about Buddhism, White Lotus reference. But it's that idea of non-attachment, and letting go. If I'm constantly judging something as bad and negative, I don't always squeeze the juice out of it. I had an experience this morning where I had to tell someone something that I was feeling like disappointment around. I was like, I'm disappointed in myself. I don't want to tell this person this thing. I'm upset. And old self would be like, just wait till the last minute to tell them. I'd go into avoidance. And today I said to myself, I was like, Amor Fati, like embrace this fate. This thing is happening. It's less than ideal. But what if you're just honest about your feelings to this person? And instead of trying to make an excuse and wait till the last minute to tell them, what if you actually use this as an opportunity to be vulnerable? And you were like, because I can be vulnerable with this person. Hey, I'm really disappointed. I'm feeling shame coming up. Um, I don't like how I feel. I don't like letting you down. I don't like disappointing you. And in that moment, because I could break through and break through that vulnerability, I was like, this doesn't seem like a gift. This seems like a negative experience. And if I actually embrace the experience in this moment, what actually is the gift and how is this trying to grow and evolve my soul? And I realized, I'm like, oh, this is asking me to become more vulnerable. This is asking me to become more open. This is asking me to be okay with being less than perfect and potentially experiencing rejection. So, all I'm going to leave you with today is Amor Fati. How are you embracing your own fate? How are you embracing the things that happen on the external that impact you on the internal in a different kind of way than you expect? How are you embracing the things that impact you on the internal that then lead to external shifts and changes? You know, as above, so below. How can we really connect to embracing where life takes us? That's all I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for listening to this very first episode of the On the Roof with Jess podcast. I look forward to seeing you next week.